G'day, how are we? Thank you for joining me on part 2 of making a custom hema ready small sword. Being a part 2, there is a part 1, but don't worry about that at all. You don't have to watch the previous one. I completely ballsed up the forging and we're going to be starting all over again. But if you would like to leave a pity comment, like, or view over there, I'm not going to complain in the slightest. Apparently that helps my algorithm. But because of all that, we're starting right in the thick of it in the workshop. But to kick things off, we're going to be cutting out a new blank of mild steel so that I can get the forging done nice and easy. After that, we'll take it to the blacksmith, get it forged into shape, and we'll bring it back here, remove a bit of stock, get it looking nice and pretty. And if we have time, I'd love to get started on some of the other components of the handle. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. Last time around, I used this picture as an indication of where we're going for this build. Now, it's not particularly good, so I've upgraded it to this lovely bit of pixel art I did. On top of that, to avoid confusion while we're working on all the different elements of this build, each component I'm working on screen is going to glow red. You might also notice that I'm using a lapel mic now. The audio in the last video was absolute garbage, so I'm hoping this helps. Let me know if it does. The lucky last thing is a question to you who might be watching my video. I designed this style of small sword mainly because of a number of skill issues that I had to overcome with design. And despite my looking, to date, I've never actually seen an example of a small sword in history or whatever that's been made in the same way. Specifically, what I'm referring to is the split steel frame that contains the part of arm, the quillon, and the knuckle bow that's bent in such a way that allows a triangle insert to fit into the middle. So if any of you have seen anything like it in books, videos, romance novels, I would love for you to drop a comment below and send me in the right direction. What I'm really hoping for is that nobody finds anything, that I can claim this as my own invention. If that's the case, it'll no longer be the Mark II, it will be the good small sword, and with any luck, it'll make me massively famous. I think that's enough time wasting. We've got a lot of work to get through. Let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we need is another blank to forge. So here we are scribing out the lines that are going to become the basis of it. The layout here is practically identical to the one in the last video, and I'll give you a little bit better look at that a little later on. Now this bit isn't particularly complicated. All we're doing is using an angle grinder and we're cutting off the bits we don't want, making things very easy to forge later. Oh, clearly forgot to tighten the camera down, but this bit's really important because we want to get the hacksaw all the way down to the bottom so we have a nice even base so that each side's symmetrical. Now I actually made 2 blanks this time around. The one on the right is the one that we're actually going to be using. The one on the left with the straight sides is one I was hoping to weld the part on later and make things a little easier for myself. That one didn't end up surviving, but we're ready to forge now. Now the goal for this time around is to do the forging as carefully as possible. I'm painfully aware that if I'm not careful at all, I'm going to end up sending metal fatigue cracks back through the whole thing. We're going to have to start again. The basic order of operations is pretty much identical to the last video with one small difference. First thing is that we're going to bend the parter on upwards so that they're out of the way while we're forging the quillons. We did that last time. But this time around we're going to start by forging the quillons together before splitting them and then working on them separately. The hope with that is that there's less time forging while holding either the quillon or the knuckle bow, which in turn should lower our exposure to metal fatigue. This is a bit of fun, so right now I'm bending the knuckle bow into its rough shape, and I kind of decided halfway through that it might be a little bit fun to spice up the design, chuck a few twists in there. So if we're 2 twists in the knuckle bow itself, both going in opposite directions, and then we flip it over and I'll chuck another little one in the quillon. Last time around we made this, and the issue with it was that we had some cold shuts forming on either side that were spreading as cracks throughout the whole piece. Not happy with that, so we decided we'd start making some different ones. I showed off 2 types of blanks that we were going to be creating. The first one was this one, which was the straight-sided one with none of these part on going on. So I was going to weld on the part on later. The issue with this design though was that we actually started having the same thing, like really bad there. That's some fat cracking going on. Miserable. Don't like it. Disgusting. On to the next one. The other one that we're making though was this bad boy, which we are very happy with. There's a few bits where I messed up here and there, but for the most part they're all cosmetic. I can work around them. It's not 100% even, and I also got a little too hot when I was bending here. So I'll have to file those parts out straight. That said, I think the proportions are pretty nice. I think we can clean it up, make it look très chouette. So I think the first thing is to start that process, get it looking nice and shiny, get rid of any of the ugly little imperfections, and see how we go. We're going to start the cleanup by getting rid of the burn marks that we gave the rear quillon while twisting it. This was a smidge harder than I expected because all the imperfections wanted to kick me off and have me filing away our twist. Next we'll get rid of the shoulders that we're giving the part iron a little bit of support while we were forging out everything else. And then we'll lighten things up a bit by doing a little bit of general stock removal. For these Timstyle hilts, we want to chuck a little bit of brass up the clacker like that. And in order to get that, we need to file this out nice and flush. On the last one, we tried to do this like pretty little curve situation, and I found that that was an absolute nightmare to machine flush. So I bought a piece of square stock, and we're just going to try and file this out. If we can get that looking clean, hopefully this will fit in nicely, and then we can move on to the next stage. Now we started with a little bit of square stock, cut off a chunk, and the idea was that was going to fit nicely into here. We faceted off the sides, make them look nice. But the issue I was having, and the reason for all this mess, is that now that I'm starting with square stock on its diagonal, I didn't know how to drill through the bloody thing. Tried clamping it down, there's shit all over the place. I tried literally everything. Eventually I just gave up, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna eyeball this. We're gonna have to do a bunch of work to get it looking flush again. I'm sick and tired, I've got to leave in a sec. So I eyeballed it, and I absolutely nailed it. Al bloody dente. Holy shit. I cannot believe it. Now there's a space that goes in between there, hence the gaps, but holy shit. Holy crap. That will never happen again. That was so perfect. There's no reason that should have worked. Anyway, now we just got to punch a hole through the copper, get that annealed again, upset the ends into that, give it a trim, and should be good. As a quickie aside, we're not actually going into great detail with this piece of copper specifically because it ended up having way too many gaps in between the steel and the brass. I felt like the quillon tip wasn't quite interesting enough with just the twist, so we turned each corner of that twist into a little spike. This was pretty straightforward. All we're doing is setting the knuckle bone in its final position and adjusting one of the quillons to make it even. Now there's still some scale in the value of the twists that we've made, so we'll blast that out with a file. And just like I promised, we're moving on to redoing the copper insert. So we'll get our hole cut. Anneal the piece to make it easier to bend. Forget to film the bending. File it back so that there's only a few mils showing outside of the brass. We'll then pin it down like an inlay so that the copper fills all the little imperfections that I left over in the steel. And lastly, we just need to get rid of all the excess copper. Now last but definitely not least, we had a smidge of time left over at the workshop, so we'll use that getting our wood ready. Believe it or not, we'll be using red gum. But after a rocky start, the rubber has finally hit the road and we are flying to completion. While we still have a lot to go, I am very excited to get it all done. And I'm particularly excited for the next episode. We're going to start that one working on the lathe. Those things freak me out and I am very concerned about ending up as a workplace safety video. So we're going to take it super slowly, super carefully. But by the end of that, we should have our washers, pommel and locking nut all finished. I also want to get the handle and the inserts roughed in. We need to buy ourselves a new blade. And then finally, I'm a little nervous about getting started on the handguard. I got big ideas for that and I might be about to bite off a lot more than I can chew. But we'll take it step by step and there is a slim chance that by the end of the next video, we might be able to show the whole completed thing off. With that, if you made it here, thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. If you liked it, please do chuck a like and a comment down below. And if I've tempted you to seeing this thing through to completion, please chuck us a subscribe and I'd love to see you in the next one.